This is The Roadmap with Ted Jenkins.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Roadmap exclusively here on ASBN.com. I'm Ted Jenkins, and every week we bring you some of the brightest CEOs and business owners and entrepreneurs. We're talking about how to climb the ladder, how to scale your business, and ultimately, can you exit stage left one day? I've got a great entrepreneur here in Atlanta, Josh McAfee. I've known him for a long time. We're going to talk about the recruiting market today and Humans Doing and what you've done with that company, because I know you've been in the recruiting business a long time, but I want to know,
A little while.
and I know the audience wants to know, how did you decide to get into the recruiting game, and why did you decide to be a founder of Humans Doing?
So a little bit of dumb luck and a lot of hard work. So graduated college and ended up in copier sales. And one of my clients—
That's always a good one.
Yeah, one of my clients, great training. One of my clients was a recruiting company, and they convinced me to come be a recruiter. I told them no 3 times, and finally they got me. And I started my journey in recruiting, and I found out I actually have a passion for helping people, which is translated into helping people make great hiring and career decisions now. So I did the corporate thing for a little while. Around turn of the century, things got a little rough, and I just kind of ended up having a situation where I had a lot of companies that needed to hire people and a lot of people that needed jobs, and I was putting them together, just trying to be helpful. And one of the companies hired 5 people that I referred to them, and they said, oh, by the way, send me an invoice.
You're like, what?
So, and that invoice ended up being, a little over $100,000.
You know, there are a lot of business owners that complain about lead generation, but in all the people I think I've known in my time in Atlanta, you are probably one of the greatest at just picking up the phone and making a call. Like, if people see you here in the city of Atlanta, you're probably on the phone.
Yeah.
What is it? Do you think people have phonophobia, or, sometimes when you don't have leads, is the answer to just pick up the phone and start making phone calls?
Yes, but the phone call is a step in the process. It's not the end all.
Right.
The old adage, nobody cares what you know till they know that you care. The phone is just
that's a great
tool.
adage.
The phone is just a tool to get people out for a cup of coffee, for a drink, and what I've found is that the more I invest, like I've got over 1,400 people that I wish a happy birthday to every year.
Wow.
And I pick up the phone and I say happy birthday. And inevitably, it's kind of interesting. They say, "Wow, you're either the first person that's called to say happy birthday, or man, you're the only person that calls every year."
Right.
And it's just a neat little relationship building thing.
Isn't that crazy? You're the only person that calls every year. It's like
they get a ton of text messages, with a little birthday thing
Right.
with the balloons that go up and all that. But I've found that human connection, text messages and emails are easy. LinkedIn is I just consider LinkedIn crack. It's a drug.
Right.
Same thing with a lot of social media, but that actual genuine connection, when it zeroes down to the people where you can be most valuable to, matters. And the rest of it is just, when you're building your social and all that, it's perceived relationship. You're building relationship with you as a brand versus you as a person.
So talk to me a little bit that in the software business since probably 2000, this term of SaaS, software as a solution, has been such a coined term. But I noticed that you are developing something in the recruiting business called, I call it RAS, if I'm saying it right, recruiting as a solution.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So typical SaaS is, you're buying a piece of software and you're actually licensing it for a period of time for a number of users. So, and it's a recurring revenue model for the companies that are selling the service, and for the companies that are using it, it's something that's predictable, and from a budgetary perspective, the bean counters and the investors usually like it because it's predictable.
Right.
So recruiting is typically very lumpy financially. It's unexpected expense. It's frustrating because you don't know what it's actually going to cost until you have somebody's salary. If you're getting contractors, you never really understand what the markups are, and that becomes a point of contention where you never really know if your recruiting vendors are really a partner or just milking you.
Right.
So I actually took a group of CEOs and CFOs out for steak dinner and had put a nice bottle of bourbon in the center, and I asked them to list out all the things that they really hated about working with recruiters. And we ended up on a second bottle of bourbon, by the way.
That's where the real good stuff
Yeah,
came out, right?
and then they listed all the things they didn't like about recruiting, and I said, great, now let's turn it around. Now that we're all 2.5 sheets to the wind, let's solve for it. So that's how the recruiting as a service came out.
I mean, but in the world of owning a business, a lot of business owners dream about making an exit. When you look at a traditional recruiting company, and now what you're doing with this RAS model, does it dramatically change the multiples in the way that it does change the multiples? So what would the difference be, that you'd normally sell a recruiting firm at a 4 times cash flow, but this could be a 12 times cash flow? Is it that big?
I wouldn't say it's that dramatic a difference, but businesses, when you can show predictable and recurring revenue, especially in a services business, versus what typical recruiting businesses are, is they may have consistent flow, but it's from different clients, and if something happens with one client, it can be pretty significant. With ours, we're locked in, and we've got a lot of data that shows all of our clients really like it and they're renewing.
Right.
So they like being able to get a discount and spread their cost of recruiting out over a year versus having to pay to once.
But it does underscore that point that if you're thinking about starting a business, predictable recurring revenue is always going to be valued a lot higher on that roadmap than would be if you had project-based business.
100%. But what's also interesting is predictable and recurring revenue allows you internally, what I found coming from the services business that didn't have predictable revenue, is it allows me to make much better business decisions because I know what my budget's going to be. I know what I can do with it versus, 1 month could be feast, the next month could be famine.
A lot of people don't think about recruiting when they start a small business. And so the way that they hire people is, tell me, a family friend, or maybe I go on a Facebook and I saw one the other day. It said, DM me if you know somebody for an office administrator job. Why is that such a colossally bad mistake versus hiring a professional recruiter, somebody that knows how to find that talent?
Well, it depends on where you're at. I mean, if you're bootstrapping a younger, smaller organization, sometimes friends and family is the right route to go. I mean, if you've got a good social media following, or you're known in the industry, it can be a great route to go. But if you've exhausted that, or there's a time sensitivity, or there's a knowledge sensitivity, or it's a single point of failure that you have to replace, or there's something critical and urgent, and the opportunity cost of your time and not having that role filled usually far outweighs the cost of using a recruiter.
And what's the biggest mistake you see from business owners when they hire people? Because I feel like, people don't calculate the cost of retention. They often think about the cost of hiring and say, oh gosh, I might have to pay a recruiting company $15,000 to get this hire, but what would it cost me? What's the biggest mistake that you see?
You're kind of hitting, and you're kind of answering the question in that, business owners, they look at the cost that it's going to take from a dollar perspective, but they're not looking at what not having that role filled is going to happen to do to their team. An example, we had a client that needed to hire one person on their development team last year, and they were off on $5,000. So the deal didn't come together because of $5,000. This is a $160,000 versus $165,000 decision. The client opted to not do that. The team had 7 developers on the team. Well, 5 developers, 2 people in support roles, and because that role didn't get filled, they lost 4 of their 5 developers. We actually had to fill 5 people instead of 1. And all of them were at significantly higher salaries than the person had wanted to pay.
With all the companies that you work with, do you have a favorite recruiting question? Have you seen one that sticks out to you over time? I heard somebody the other day, there was a company here in Atlanta called Roadie that got built out. And I know
Roadie well, yeah.
Very, very interesting company. And he said his favorite interview question is, what's 1/2 plus 1/3? What does that equal? And just to see how people would actually react to it.
That's hilarious. That's actually a great question.
It is a great question.
I'm like doing the math in my head. It's kind of funny. A question that I ask is actually on the client side when we're qualifying a role is, how are you going to measure success? Because what we've found is that if you can articulate how how their success is going to be measured and why they're valuable in the organization, then they're set up and aligned from a communication perspective right up front. They know what they need to do. Whereas a lot of job descriptions these days are typically very misaligned from what's
Right.
actually going to happen. So you set people up for failure walking in the
Right.
door.
You hire them into a job, you say, this is what the job's going to be. Then they get into the organization and then it's something else. I want to know because I feel like the laws, it continues to pop up about this notion of being a W-2 or being a 1099 contractor. And when you go to companies, do they often look to try to hire contractors or they look to do W-2? And are there mistakes that you see that happen within that model?
Yeah, this bit me in the butt early on. We hired somebody as a 1099, and a year and a half later, when they were doing their taxes, they said they were an employee. Well, the IRS came at me, and and that was a mid five-figure mistake from the IRS, and then the kick in the jimmy was then Georgia State came by right after and said, "Oh, you owe us too." And so we're real hesitant around, like for small gig jobs, 1099 is just fine. But for bigger things, you really should strongly encourage W-2 or having them, incorporate to where they're an actual, corporation and you're paying the corp.
A few weeks ago, I was very vocal in a CNBC article around non-competes. And I'm wondering, it's a weird world today, I think, because the FTC is getting involved in thinking about banning non-competes. I don't know if it will go to Congress or not, but when you place somebody in a technology job, especially at some of these big companies, it could be Google, Microsoft, whatever it may be, will non-competes hold weight? Do they even belong there anymore? When you tell somebody, hey, Josh, you just can't even work anywhere in the United States. We're not even telling you you have to move 50 miles. We're saying if you live in Atlanta and now you're working in California, that just doesn't seem fair. What are you seeing from companies today?
So there's a delineation, in different roles. So like a tech role, somebody who's a developer, non-solicit, non-disclosure, those things are
that makes sense.
Those make absolute sense. But in those roles, non-compete, oftentimes can be a little egregious. The spirit versus the letter of the law, attorneys aren't typically geared towards, writing things for the spirit of something.
Right.
But on the sales and the marketing side, the non-competes, you've worked and put your blood, sweat, and tears into building your organization. Let's just say you've made a business decision they don't like, and all of a sudden the team just says, great, well, now we're not Oxygen Financial, we're Noxygen Financial, and they go off and break away and take your client base that you've put your blood, sweat, and tears into. So I see both sides of it. We typically, for our agreements internally, push more on the non-solicit. Right. If you've touched a client, non-solicit, that's where we push a lot of ours on, because we just want to, my belief is that if you've created a great environment and an irresistible place for people to grow, learn, and make a living, that they may grow out of your company, but they'll grow out as an advocate and a fan versus somebody and refer you business and refer you other employees and always speak well of you. Sure. So I'm a big fan of helping organizations build out that alumni, kind of mindset, and a mindset where their environment's just top notch.
So you've been in and around a lot of startups, and you've seen a lot of growth in here. Remember guys like David Cummings, when he wasn't as big as David Cummings is today, and Kyle Porter of Sales Loft. But I'm wondering, you're both an investor and you're an entrepreneur, and how do you bifurcate the decision around when you invest in somebody else's company when you have no control, versus how you invest in your own company or make additive investments into your company?
Well, early on, I did a very crappy job of that. So I can talk about 3 or 4 companies that I invested in that have done very, very well, but I tend to sweep under the rug the 20 or so that I invested in that were gonna make me rich, and they turned out to be goose eggs. So due diligence, and don't make decisions alone. Find people that, either the space really, really well and you believe in the leadership team and what they're doing, and you see them making really good decisions, or tag along, invest in funds, which is what you and I have done a fair bit of together, and
you spread out your risk a little bit.
Spread out the risk a little bit as well, and and just make sure you're investing with people versus just out there on an island.
So as you grow Humans Doing and the company continues to grow this RAS model, how will you know personally as you scale the business, either A, you step out a little bit and get somebody else to cash flow it, or B, you put it on the market and sell it? How will you know when that right time is?
The good news is I'm probably not going to be making that decision. So my partner Maurice is he's got longer runway, and he wants to grow it to a certain level. So we're looking at it from the perspective of what's the right timing. What's the right timing for that would be something that more him and his leadership team, when they're doing it'll make, versus something that I'm going to make. But in terms of looking at it, I mean, like 2022 was a great time to sell a business because valuations were absolutely through the roof. Selling in a down economy, I would strongly encourage most people to not do that. Batten down the hatches, do what you got to do to keep things stable, growing if possible, and preparing yourself for the next big boom. And then once you've gone through that, sell on the upswing.
I've always watched you in your career and observed, even the days that we gave back to the Georgia Aquarium, about your commitment to giving back to the community here in Atlanta, and also missions that you've done around the world. How important is it for an owner of a company to be involved in just giving back in general?
Very wise person once said, who you want to be is more important than what you want to do, and who you want to be should dictate what you do.
Right.
So for me, it's really important. I want my legacy, and I want, when you guys are at my funeral, I want you thinking about the things that were impactful, not, Josh built a company. I want to talk about, hey, here's what we did in the aquarium and its impact on Atlanta, what we did with Jars of Clay and its impact on people who just needed a little bit of encouragement and help to get on their feet again. Same thing with trips over to Africa or being on the ground in Haiti after the earthquake. Just those are the things that are impactful that I feel like define me, not the things that I'm doing to make a living.
Well, thank you for everything that you're doing here for the city of Atlanta and our community, and helping hundreds or thousands of companies across the United States recruit better people and try to retain them over time. I recommend that you check out Humans Doing if you're thinking about recruiting people or trying to grow your business. I know Josh for a long time. He does a great job for people. And just remember, you are a leader in your company over time, and you really bear the weight of the decisions you make and the actions you take. And that will, in some sense, dictate your future here on The Roadmap. Thanks for watching us this week. We'll look forward to having The Roadmap every single week right here exclusively on ASBN.com.
Thanks for watching The Roadmap with Ted Jenkins. This has been a JBF Business Media production.